Everyone will rant and rave about a flagship model of a new car, but we're here this week to figure out if the base model Kia Sportage is worth your time. Now, if you watched our previous review of the Kia Sportage, you will already know some of the things I'm about to tell you. So the Sportage is available in Malaysia starting at about 145,000 ringgit, rising to about 187,000 ringgit. Within that range, there are 4 variants to choose from and 2 engines. You can get a 1.6-litre turbo either as a front-wheel drive or all-wheel drive, or you can get the base engine, which is this, a 2-litre 4-cylinder naturally aspirated engine mated to a 6-speed automatic gearbox, sending that power to the front wheels. Now, while this engine and gearbox combination does seem to be one step below the 1.6 turbo, both in terms of output as well as in terms of forward gear ratios, there is something to be said about this powertrain setup, which we will get to a little bit later. Now, in terms of the exterior, there are a few things that we've lost as you move from the turbo down into the naturally aspirated motor. So for starters, we no longer get LED fog lights, but we still get LED headlights up here with manual levering, replete with this large daytime running light as part of the Opposites United design language, which I think looks quite good. We have also lost the LED indicators up here, which I think are a bit of a shame, but that's what it is. As we move further down the side, the wheels have also shrunk by another inch. These are 17-inch alloy wheels wrapped in hand-cooked tires. Now, naturally, you can get bigger 18-inch units if you were to get the 1.6 turbo, but I do think this wheel and tire combination doesn't look undersized on the Kia Sportage. And that's most evident from this view, because you can see even the 17s fill the arches quite nicely and it still looks very natural and pretty good looking if you ask me. Now, as we move further down the side, there are no other exterior changes when you move from the 2-litre into the 1.6 turbo, which means that you still get the same little bit of brushed chrome garnish underneath the windows, as well as this nice little surround back here, which now that the BYD Atto 3 doesn't have it, is reminding me of the Atto 3. And again, because the Kia Sportage in our market is the long wheelbase model, we also get a lot more rear legroom, a lot more space sort of behind the B pillar. This is what we want and this is what we expect from a C-segment SUV. And so we're glad that Kia Malaysia and BERMAZ made the choice to bring in the long wheelbase model versus the more compact European short wheelbase model. Now, at the rear, it's broadly the same treatment as we saw from the turbo. So up here, you get again the Opposites United LED daytime running light or positioning light signature, which I think looks quite good. However, the tail lamps have lost their LED illumination, which means the brake and indicators are now done up in bulb, but at least the reverse light is still fully LED. The rear windscreen wiper also hides underneath the spoiler, which I think looks quite neat and is very similar to what we've seen before from the Sportage as well as the Carnival. The other thing we've lost is the powered tailgate on this base model, but that's not too bad. However, in terms of practicality, the Sportage is as practical as ever. There is plenty of space back here, more than enough for 5 people's worth of luggage. There is even a little bit of space underneath the boot floor, replete with a space-saver spare wheel, and the rear seats can be folded 60/40 for added practicality, meaning that the Kia Sportage does pretty well as a family car because you'll never have to question this space even when it's time to balik kampung. Now, the interior of this base Kia Sportage does lose out on a few things, but I think that it maintains a lot of the necessary functions that you would want in a new modern C-segment SUV. So for example, the infotainment screen is now smaller and it now comes with sort of shortcut buttons on either side rather than them built into that secondary touchscreen down here, which is also gone, having made way for a slightly more rudimentary button and knob setup to control the dual zone climate control. Now, although these are again downgrades from the flagship model, it doesn't really feel like it because the operation is still very good and very tactile. All the buttons here feel nice, and of course your infotainment system still comes with wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto, which is what you want. And then as you move further down, the gloss black plastic has now made way for this sort of matte finish. The upholstery on the seats have made way, instead of leather, these are now done up in fabric. We also now have a manual driver's seat instead of a powered one, although the passenger seat remains manual even on the flagship models. And then of course you also lose the Harman Kardon audio system that you get in the flagship Kia Sportage. But aside from that, all of that seems perfectly fine. The most offensive part of this downgrade, however, is this instrument cluster. Because in the higher end models, this is obviously digital, and that also includes a display for the blind spot view monitor, which comes out on the individual dials left and right, depending which side that you're indicating. However, on this, It's still a digital instrument cluster, so to speak, but the screen has been reduced to just a little bit in the middle. On top of that, the display for it and the graphics for it just look quite low rent. And for 146,000 ringgit, that doesn't feel all that great. And then after you've gotten in and you've made peace with the fabric upholstery, then you hold the steering wheel, which even on this base model is not leather wrapped. This is a polyurethane steering wheel, which just from the moment you touch it just does not feel as high quality an item as you would expect to receive on a car that costs this much money. Now, mercifully, all of these things are upgraded if you move into the 2-litre high, which means that, again, you're not making do with this or that instrument cluster, most of these things at least. Now, as we move further around the cabin, we also don't get a wireless charging pad, but at least you get a USB-C and USB-A port, as well as a 12-volt socket right up here. You get a little bit of cubby storage, large enough for my phone. You get a couple of deployable cup holders here, which is always nice to see, and a pretty decently sized center console bin, which rather worryingly in this car has a couple of latex gloves. I'm not sure what went on in this car. There's also a relatively large glove box here, which is not felt lined, which means anything you put in there may rattle about. You've got decently sized door bins, big enough for a 1.5-litre size bottle, as well as pockets up here large enough for, card holders and that sort of thing. And so this does feel decently set up to be a family car. Now, one of the other things about this interior specification, which I think is quite noteworthy, is actually this rear view mirror, because despite the fact that this is, again, the entry-level model, we still get an electrochromic rear view mirror, which is very helpful when you're driving at night because it will darken itself to ensure that you don't get blinded by vehicles behind you. I appreciate that a lot. I also like the fact that even though, again, this is the base model, we still get a multifunction steering wheel with all of the buttons and switches laid out in a very logical fashion, which is exactly what you want. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the Sportage that we get in this country is the long wheelbase model, which means that there is plenty of space back here. With the front seat set in my driving position, about 170 centimeters, you can see I have a good amount of knee room and a pretty good amount of headroom too, which means that this is perfectly suitable for 4 adults. Now, if you want to sit 5, it's pretty comfy too, because this rear seat base, although it is raised, which means that you lose a little bit of headroom, it's still quite wide. And even though there is a central tunnel, that is also pretty wide too, which means there's plenty of space for my feet, although obviously I can stretch out underneath the 2 seats in front of me if I want even more legroom, if I can negotiate with the passengers on either side. Now, in terms of amenities back here, stuff back here is still pretty good. You get a couple of air conditioning vents here, which are about crotch coolery sort of level. You get decently sized door bins, big enough for a 1-litre size bottle. You get pockets up here as well. And of course, you get that deployable center armrest that you saw earlier, replete with a couple of cup holders. You also get a little bit of cubby storage down here for smaller items, whatever those might be, which means that, again, life back here is pretty comfy. Now, the party piece for the Sportage, to me at least, are these rear seat recline angles, because there are some 15 different degrees of adjustment, which means you can go from bolt upright like this all the way to a very, very lean back position like this, suitable for a long drive, although I sort of prefer it about here. And so that means that the 2 outer passengers will be very comfy. You also obviously get ISOFIX mounts back here for a couple of child seats, and because these doors open quite wide and they have a relatively large aperture, even a bulky rear-facing child seat should not be an issue at all. And because of the overall space in here, it should mean that the furthest edge of a bulky rear-facing child seat shouldn't rub up against the backs of the front seats, which is very nice indeed. Now, the thing about this particular Sportage is that obviously being the entry-level model, it is meant to be something of a price competitor. It's meant to be able to draw people into showrooms, although this might not necessarily be the variant that people buy. However, there is an ace in the sleeve in this Sportage, and that is best revealed from the driver's seat. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning of this review, the base model Kia Sportage that we're driving today runs a 2-litre naturally aspirated 4-cylinder engine paired to a 6-speed automatic gearbox. Now, again, on paper, it may appear that this is the lower spec model, or this is the less desirable model within the Kia Sportage lineup, but I disagree. Now, the reason I say this is for 2 reasons. Number one, because this is not a turbocharged engine, you don't suffer from turbo lag, which means that the response times in this car, at least from when you input the throttle and when the car actually starts to take off, feels a lot more agile. It feels a lot more immediate. On top of that, the 6-speed automatic gearbox is very, very fast to respond. If I'm not mistaken, this is the same gearbox that we first saw from the Kia Rio in Malaysia, which means that this is a tried and tested gearbox, which should be pretty reliable as well. Now, in terms of driving experience, because this car runs on slightly smaller alloy wheels, it does mean that there is a little bit of delay in terms of steering input, because obviously there's a little bit of sidewall flex whenever you do make adjustments in this car. But because the tires themselves are thicker, it also means that when you hit speed bumps and so on, this car feels very, very smooth. Now, Kia suspension systems are set up to feel a little bit more European in the sense that they prioritize body control over outright comfort. And so while the secondary ride in this car is relatively firm, the primary ride remains quite well adjusted. And on top of that, because the secondary ride in this car is set up the way it is, it also means that when you're driving, say, at higher speeds on the motorway, this car feels very, very stable indeed, which is exactly what you want from a car of this nature that will be carting around the family and doing family duties and stuff like that, which means that this is a car that you can rely and depend upon. Now, in terms of the overall performance of this engine, while it does make a lot of sense at urban speeds when you're just sort of potting about town or getting your various different errands done, I will admit that it does sort of fall flat a little bit when you're trying to cruise on the motorway. This is a car that is very, very happy to drive at 110, 120 kilometers an hour. Because if you were to drive any faster than that, that's when you realize that the lack of torque from this powertrain means that the engine will be revving quite hard in order to maintain a higher cruising speed. Although if you keep it at between 110 to 120, I have been able to see fuel consumption figures as low as 7 liters to the 100. And in fact, I'm pretty sure you get lower still depending on the geography or terrain that you're driving on. Which means that even though this is the larger engine, it is still very, very economical indeed. Now, if you were to drive at higher speeds over longer distances, you will have a concern about noise, vibration, harshness, or overall refinement within the cabin. Now, the Kia Sportage is noteworthy because it does not offer dual laminate glass on the side windows, only the windscreen offers it. As a result, there is a little bit more road and wind noise than you might expect, specifically wind noise as you're driving along, and that makes itself apparent and known at about 115 kilometers an hour. In terms of road noise, although these tires are not that wide, they are a little bit noisier, although you could always upgrade to something like Continental Ultra Contact 6 tires in order to further reduce that and then get a slightly more serene driving experience. But overall, I think that NVH levels in this base level Sportage are just fine. And that's important because, as I mentioned, this car doesn't get the Harman Kardon audio system, which means that you don't really have that much punch and oomph to drown that sound out. Now I have to talk about the Sportage's weakest point, I think, at this variant, and that has to do with safety. Now, if you want Kia's very, very polished level 2 semi-autonomy system, you are going to have to spend a little bit of money to get into the 2-litre high model, because this 2-litre mid doesn't have anything. You only get a reversing camera, not 360. You don't get blind spot warning, you don't get the blind spot view monitor, you don't get AEB, you don't get anything at all. This is as bare basic as a new C-segment SUV comes. So on the one hand, this will appeal to buyers who are slightly more concerned that if these features were to fail in the future, they will cost a lot of money. I do apologize for the noise, because as you can tell, it is raining. Now, variants like this will appeal to the sort of customers who are worried that advanced features will fail over time, like cameras and radars and sensors and so on. But to me, to try and sell this car as a family car, I wouldn't recommend this variant, because if I were to put, say, my kid or my spouse or my elderly parents in a car like this, I would want something with radar, with lane keep assist, with blind spot monitoring, and as a vehicle that will drive me to and from work, I would also want something like traffic jam assist and adaptive cruise control, which this car also doesn't offer. It does come with cruise control, which is certainly nice to see, which means that again, when you take in longer distances, you can just set it at like 110, 120 and just let the car do the rest of the work. Now, at 145, 146,000 ringgit, I do think that this base Kia Sportage is a decently specified and decently built vehicle. Sure, you're lacking things like ADAS and the sort of look-at-me features that you might expect from a vehicle at this price point, but I do think that for customers looking for a very bare-bones, very basic, pared-down driving experience, this could be the vehicle for them. Of course, understanding context is important, which means that if you want all the bells and whistles for 20 grand less, you can get into a Proton X70, which also offers a turbocharged motor, a 7-speed dual-clutch automatic gearbox, as well as level 2 semi-autonomy. In fact, you can even get Nappa leather seats with ventilation and a panoramic sunroof should you so want to, and it now also offers wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto. Although, again, if you want something that is specified like this or looks like this or is at least this attractive, then again, you can always step up into the Kia Sportage 2.0 High, which gives you all of the features that we talked about earlier while not really compromising that much on price. I think it's about 10,000 ringgit more, and I think that's 10,000 ringgit very, very well deserved. But I think the point I'm trying to make here is the Kia Sportage is a very well specified vehicle. I think that this package is pretty good even in this base model, although this isn't the variant that I'd recommend. But overall, I think the Kia Sportage does tick the boxes in terms of a practical, usable, versatile family car. And when you pair that with BERMAZ's 5-year unlimited mileage warranty with 5 years free servicing, it does mean that driving a car like this is easy. Owning a car like this is easy. It's literally just add fuel for those first 5 years, which is exactly what makes Mazda customers come back over and over again. So now you can enjoy the BERMAZ ownership experience at an even more attractive price point, and I think that is what really makes the Kia Sportage worth a look. In any case, that concludes our review of the 2025 Kia Sportage. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, hit the little bell icon to be notified every time we make a new upload. Don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Twitter and Instagram, as well as TikTok, and you can join our new WhatsApp channel. All the links are in the description below. Thank you so much for watching. We'll catch you in the next one. Take care, stay safe, and jangan bodoh.